Up to Daf Yomi Aleph, we're about 3 lines into the page. Boy mine Rav Dimi me Rav Nachman. Rav Dimi asked Rav Nachman the following question: Mali anuche kada de malcha kam gam gabi kada de machba. So you have the kutach, which we said yesterday is a dairy dip that they would dip bread in. It has milk and it has whey, so it's dairy. Can I leave the dip next to the salt? The question is the concern that while you're dipping, some of the dairy dip will fall into the salt? And then the salt now has dairy in it, and then they would use salt for meat. So are we concerned about this? So Amar Le Aser, yeah, it's a problem. We are concerned that the dip will spill into the salt, and therefore you're not allowed to keep the dip next to the salt. Okay? Says the Gemara, it's a fair concern. Says the Gemara, well, we should be the same thing, should be vinegar. You should not be allowed to keep the kutach next to the vinegar, because the kutach, the dip, will spill into the vinegar. And they used to dip the meat in the vinegar. So it's the exact same concern. Dechalamai, what's the halacha with the vinegar? Can I leave the kutach next to the vinegar? Amrle shari, that's allowed. So what's the difference? The salt we're bothered because it'll spill in. The vinegar also you should be bothered because it's going to spill in. Maishna, so he said, when you measure me out a kur of salt, I'll explain it to you. This is a term in the Gemara that when you do something for me, I'll explain it to you. You got to work for it. The explanation, I'll say it out, so we'll say it the explanation is like this. If the kutach, we're not that concerned, but there's a slight concern the kutach, the dip, will spill into the next item. If it spills into the salt, it's sitting on top. Then mamish, the meat will touch the dip. But if it falls into the dip, falls into the vinegar, it'll be bottle in the vinegar. It's not ideal, but at least it's, it's not as big of a concern. He says, my taima, hi isse sur be'ena, halasi sur be'ena. By the salt, the dip will be sitting on top. But when it comes to the vinegar, it'll be nullified in. So it's not as severe. Okay, we said yesterday that if you salt two items together, it's a problem. The Gemara will now explain.
How does it become bottle, liquidless? How does
Salt falling into vinegar? It'll be bottle. Why not? I mean, not salt. The kutach into vinegar. Why not? It'll mix in. We said yesterday that malicha causes it to be a problem. Malicha penetrates. The Gemara will now clarify, not all malicha. It has to be so much salt that it's inedible due to its salt. A little bit of salt is not going to be a problem. So it says the Gemara, Ahu bar guzla. There was this little bird, or chicken, or pigeon, whatever it was, dinafal kimcha, that fell into kutach. So you have a raw piece of chicken that fell into the dip. So everything's cold. So the question is, can you just rinse off the chicken? So you'll say, no, because the kutach has salt in it. So he says, Shaya Rachina Bereda Rabbi Parshuna, Rachina Bereda Rapanashuna permitted it. He said, just rinse it off and you're fine. Everything's cold, just rinse it off. So it fell into the dairy dip, it fell into the sour cream. Just rinse off the raw chicken, you'll be fine. So it says the Gemara, Amar Rava, Man Chachel Mishikuli Hai. Meaning he's explaining, I'll just say this out. He's explaining, although the dip has salt in it, but it's only considered malicha to cause a problem if it's so much salt that it's inedible. And that dip is edible. So he says, so Rabbi, when he heard this heter, he says, Man chacham mishikuli hai. You have to have a big talmid chacham to give such a heter. Why? If it wasn't for him, I would think it's a problem. Kasavar, ki amar Shmuel, why? So why does Rav Chanina makel? Because Kasavar, he explains, ki amar Shmuel maliach harei kurisech. When we had yesterday that salt is able to penetrate, so the chora, the dip has salt, so it should be able to penetrate into the chicken. That's only when it's so salty that it's inedible. The Mechaber says, how much salt is that? It's the amount of salt that they salt meat to remove the blood. It's a lot of salt. A kutach has salt, but it's not that salty, so it does not have the ability to penetrate. So if it's less than that level of salt, it's not going to cause any penetration, you just have to rinse it off. Says the Gemara, but there are some exceptions. This halacha, that if chicken fell into the kutach, it's fine as long as you rinse it off, only when it's raw chicken. Avotzli, but once you roast the chicken, boy klipa. The roasted chicken softens the outside and it creates cracks. And therefore the dip will get into the cracks, so you have to peel the top layer of the chicken. More than this, v'yisbei pile, and let's say, roasted chicken is softer, so it absorbs kedei klipa, even when it's not that salty. So you peel off kedei klipa, you peel off the outside layer. But even if it's, let's say it's roasted, and I see there are cracks. I see, when you roast chicken, sometimes you'll see cuts and cracks. So says the Gemara, if you see cracks, then the entire thing is aser. Then you can't kasher it. Why? The whole point of shishim is that it's equally distributed. It's not equally distributed. It's found in the cracks. I can't get it out. So therefore, the whole thing is going to be aser. V'metaba betuvlin kuli aser. Similarly, even if there are no cracks, but if I had spiced the chicken, so I take raw chicken and I covered it with pepper and spices and garlic powder, and then it fell in, the spices will pull the milk and the kutach into it, and it's going to be a problem. Amar v'Nachman, Amar Shmuel. Okay, one more halacha. When you have a raw piece of meat that's full of blood, what do you do to get rid of the blood? So you salt it. Or you could just roast it. If you take a bloody piece of meat and roast it over the fire, and it drips, the blood will drip out. Here's the shaila. You finish roasting the meat, naturally you'll see red juice come out. That's just a normal thing. Now again, you did not salt it, you roasted it. You roasted a piece of meat without malicha. You finish roasting, it's good, and you cut it, you put it on a burger, you put it on a bun, and you cut down into the bun to cut it in half. And all of a sudden, the bun is now getting red. Is that a problem? So I would say, no, you already roasted it. Roasted it is akin to malicha, so that means that all the blood has left. What's the red juice? I don't know, whatever. That's meat. Meat has juice. Says the Gemara, no, Shmuel was mechadish. Amar of Nachman, Amar Shmuel. Shmuel was mechadish. Kikar shechatach aleh basar. If you roast meat without doing malicha, and it's fully roasted, and then you cut it onto bread, you make a sandwich out of it, you cut the sandwich in half, asur la'achla, you're not allowed to eat the bread. In other words, while you're allowed to eat the meat after it's roasted, as the Gemara is going to explain, the force of the knife will pull out blood, and it'll affect the bread. The bread is going to be asur. So if the bread gets red, that's a problem. Again, this is a chiddush, because you already roasted it. So I would assume that once you're roasting it, it's akin to malicha and it should be mutter. He's mechadish that even after roasting, it's going to be a problem. But hani mili d'asmik, but this is only true if the bread became red. If the bread did not become red, you cut the meat, but you roasted it to such an extent that no juice comes out, then it's fine. V'hani mili d'avre, and even when the liquid penetrates the loaf, it has to penetrate the entire loaf, meaning not just a little bit of the surface. It's got to be the entire bun is red. And it has to be red with a thick liquid. It can't be a thin liquid. It has to be a thick liquid, which is a little bit like bloody texture. Okay. So it's a chiddush of Shmuel that even after roasting meat without malicha, if the bun becomes red, it's aser. Shmuel, what would he do with this bread if he ever did this? Shadi leila kalve, he threw it out to the dogs. Okay, fed it to dogs. But Rav Huna yarv l'shmaya, Rav Huna gave it to his gabbai. Now that's a very strange thing. If something's aser, it's aser. Something's mutter, it's mutter. But you give it to your gabbai for. Says the Gemara, manavshach. Ishar l'kuliyama, shar yas l'kuliyama. So why is Rav Huna giving this to his gabbai? So the Gemara explains like this. Rav Huna disagrees with Shmuel. Rav Huna holds that when you roast meat and it's fully cooked, it's mutter. There's no more blood. So really the fact that the bun is red is not a problem. So why did Rav Huna not eat it? Because Rav Huna found it gross. He was squeamish. It had nothing... The reason why he discarded it was not a halachic thing. He found it disgusting. So he gave it to his gabbai because his gabbai didn't mind. If Yutaka held that it's also, we never give it to his gabbai. He held that really after you do roasting, all the blood has already come out. There's red juice coming out. It's okay, meat has juice. It's fine. He didn't eat it because he was squeamish. He gave it to his gabbai. The Gemara says, Shani Rav Huna da'anine daite. Rava ochale. Rava would eat the bun when it would get red. And kari lechamar basa, he would call it the wine of the meat. He felt that it was like a delicacy. He felt that it was mutter and he liked it. Okay. We said yesterday that they would roast meat, again without malicha, and sometimes they would take a pan and put it under the meat to catch the drippings. We said yesterday, some of that is blood. So says the Gemara, Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, Ein manichin kli tachas habasar sheyichla kol mari ad mumishaboy. You should not put the pan under the meat until the meat stops looking red. Meaning, you got to see the meat. Don't put the pan right away. Put the meat, hang the meat, and you're going to see it's going to be red blood is going to be dripping off. Because again, he did not do malicha. That's what I'm telling you. Nowadays we do malicha, but back then they didn't do malicha if they were roasting. So you're going to see blood dripping off. Don't put the pan then yet, because the pan is going to catch the blood. Wait till the drippings are no longer really red, then you put the pan in to catch the fat. Minoya Dina, how do I know when the meat has reached to the point where it's no longer giving off red liquid? Well, you understand, it's a big barbecue, it's full of steam. I'm supposed to look and see like, oh, that's too red, that's not red enough. How am I supposed to know when I could put the pan in there practically? Says the Gemara, when it starts to smoke, when the meat gives off like steam, when the meat starts giving off smoke, that means the blood is done. Okay, says the Gemara, Maskar Rashi says, the dilma tata mata iloma mata. Just because there's steam coming off, maybe the part of the meat that gives off steam doesn't have blood. It's a big steak. It's a big cowboy steak. So the steam coming off. Maybe the steam is coming from the bottom where there's no more blood, but the top still has blood. It doesn't seem to be a scientific approach. So rather, El Amar Ravashi, this is the only option. Leslie takanta el mishte beitarti galile milcha. Go to the next page. Umishvaye. The only eitzah is you take the pan of the drippings, you take salt, put it into the pan, and what that will do will be that will separate the blood from the fat. The salt will sort of pull away all the blood, and then you pull the fat off. Meaning, in other words, there's no way to just tell when the blood is done. You put the pan under there, put salt in the pan, and that'll pull away the blood, and then you'll be able to pull off the fat. Okay, here's, by the way, one quick point. Shmuel is saying, who was this? Shmuel was the one who said that once it stops dripping off red, then you could put the pan under it. Once it starts steaming, you put the pan under. Let me ask you a question. Isn't that a contradiction in Shmuel? Before we said that Shmuel says that after roasting, if I take a burger and I cut it on the bun and the bun gets red, it's a problem. Meaning even after roasting, there's still blood. But now he's saying that once the steam comes off the meat, then it's not blood anymore. I don't understand. Is there blood still when it's done roasting or not? One time Shmuel says that even when it's done roasting legamri and you cut it on a loaf, the loaf is aser because of blood. The other time Shmuel said that once you see steam come off, you can catch it because it's no longer blood. Is there blood by the end of roasting or not? Says the Gemara, Umi Amar Shmuel hachi. V'Amar Shmuel basa kika shechatach lebasa asal achlai. So says the Gemara, Shani hasam da'agav duchka t'sakina palit. Generally, at the end of roasting, there's no more blood that's going to come out, except if you cut it. So if you're just catching it, naturally the blood is done. If you take a knife and you cut it, that force of the knife is going to pull out the blood that's in it, and that's why the loaf is going to be an issue. Okay, one more halacha, sort of end up with this. You're allowed to salt multiple pieces of meat at the same time. Why aren't we concerned that the blood from meat A is going to go into meat B? The answer is because they're all pumping out blood, and they're too busy pumping out blood. They're not going to absorb blood. So you have two steaks, you're one on top of the other. You cover it all with salt. It's fine because they're so busy pumping out blood, nothing is going to absorb blood. But says the Gemara Chiddush, Amar Nachman, Dagim va'oifish shemalchim zeh zeh asurin. If you salt fish and chicken together, then the fish is going to be a problem. Meaning the fish is going to absorb the chicken blood. So if you salt it together, but I don't know why you're salting fish. You don't have to salt fish, but if you salt fish and chicken together, the fish is going to absorb the chicken blood. Let me ask you a question. What's the difference? Why is it when there's two pieces of meat, you're allowed to salt it together? Because we say each piece is pumping out blood, so it's not going to absorb the blood, but fish and chicken is a problem. I don't understand. What's the difference? Says the Gemara, Heichi dami. If we're talking about an unperforated vessel, you're not allowed to salt anything in an unperforated vessel. You have to let the blood flow. But if we're talking about a perforated vessel, which is what they would use for melicha, why is this a problem? You always salt multiple pieces together. So why is the fish and chicken are a problem? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you the difference. Fish and chicken do not pump out blood at the same rate. Meat, because they both pump out blood at the same rate, because they're both the same texture and same whatever, so they're both pumping at the same time. When they both stop, they're both done. But fish and chicken are not like that. Says the Gemara, because fish is soft, they pump out right away. So they pump out in the first 5 minutes and then they're done. Chicken takes longer. So by the time fish is done pumping out, chicken is still pumping out, hence the fish will absorb. The reason why the meat is mutter is because it's so busy pumping out it won't absorb, but that's true with all meat because they have the same textures. But fish and chicken, because they have different textures, they're not pumping out blood at the same time. So the fish is going to pump out all its blood. By the time the malicha is done and it's no longer emitting blood, the chicken is still emitting blood. So the chicken will then pump into the fish. That's what the Gemara says. Loilam kliminuk v'dagim mishum derafi karmayu kadmi upalti v'oifis kamiti. But chicken is hard. Once the fish is done, the chicken is still pumping. And the fish will absorb from the chicken. One last halacha. You're allowed to salt meat together, right? We're not concerned about the blood because they're so busy pumping out blood, they're not going to absorb. Here's the question. Rav Mari Baruch will end with this. He salted meat together, but he finds out one of the meat was a treif. Was a treif meat. It came from a treif animal. A cow that was treif. Came a treif. So here's the shaila. Is it a problem? So we said, they're all pumping blood at the same time. They won't absorb. The question is, though, normally when it comes to kosher meat, the only issue is dam. Dam, it's not going to absorb. Non-kosher meat, there's dam that's an issue, flavor is an issue, fat is an issue, juice is an issue. So the question is like this. This concept that by dam, there's two ways to look at it. When two items are pumping out blood, they will not absorb anything, in which case it'll be mutter by treif as well, or no. By blood, they're too busy pumping out the blood, they won't absorb the blood. But they might absorb juice, they might absorb fat, they might absorb other things, which by kosher meat is fine, but by a treif meat is a problem. So that's the Gemara Shaila. Again, it's pumping out blood, so it's not going to absorb blood. The question is, will it absorb other things? Again, by kosher meat, it's not negeya because the only issue is dam. But by treif, you have to worry about the juice, you have to worry about fat, you have to worry about flavor, you got to worry about dam, you got to worry about everything. Says the Gemara, also kami de Rava Amarle hatameim laeser tziran v'roitan v'kifan shelahen. Not only is treif a problem with dam, but you have to worry about the juice, you have to worry about the gravy and the sediment, and that it will absorb. All right, we'll stop here. We'll pick it up tomorrow.
I'll be like,